Hi everyone, Stepan here. It's Tuesday, so we are going to continue the series on Tigran Petrosian. Today we are continuing the 1944 Georgian Championship. We saw one win last time, a 16-move game. And today we are going to have a look at a game where he had black against Bakhtadze. I'm guessing a Georgian player, has a very Georgian name. And apparently Petrosian scored 8 out of 17 in his first Georgian Championship. Now, I couldn't check that information anywhere, nor could I find all 17 games. I only have 3 games available. If you have them, please share. And the championship was won by Vladas Mikenas. That was the 5th Georgian Championship ever played. Okay, now this game is interesting because Petrosian played like Petrosian for the first 15 moves, and then he started playing like Tal, and that I think this is the most fun game played by Petrosian I've had in the series so far, and I hope you enjoy it. It was a very theoretical King's English up to a point. So after c4 knight f6, knight c3 e5, this is the King's English opening, a very well trodden theoretical line with so much theory that I think even the strongest players tend to avoid playing this. For example, Dingliren, Aronian, Carlsen, Caruana, they've all played this from both sides, and there's so much theory that you simply have to be well prepared to play successfully. Now, after the move knight f3 and knight c6 for black, there are so many options for white that black simply has to know. Black probably has to go through 1,000 pages and play 100 training games before he is prepared for everything. Now, in the game, d4 was played, which is a sideline. The main move is g3. After g3, now black could play d5 or bishop b4, which are two completely different lines. White could also play e3 on move 4, white could play a3, white could play e4, white could play d3. Those are all very much different openings. One common thing they have together is that this is sort of a Sicilian in reverse, a knight c6 Sicilian for white. As you can see, if black plays the move d5, then it's going to be an open Sicilian, where white has an extra tempo. So this is Sicilian territory in reverse. Okay, his opponent plays d4, which is a sideline, but it's a move. And according to the engines, and this I know because I briefly considered playing the English myself, this is a less known move, and black is supposed to have equalized already, or even he is slightly better, but not too many people know what to do against this. ed4 is the move for black, and if black knows a lot of theory, then he should stand equal. So after ed4, knight d4, black now continues bishop b4, and the idea is that he could double the c-pawns, but after bishop g5, that could be quite tricky. Now h6 is theory, bishop h4 is theory, and now bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight e5. And white, of course, has a ruined pawn structure, but white has the bishop pair, white has a ton of activity, and the game could be very interesting. The justification for playing this is the move f4, and now taking the pawn on c4 is a big mistake, and that's one of the reasons why people play this variation in the first place. And the theoretical move is knight g6, after which bishop f6, queen f6 is played, and the game should calm down for black. But if knight c4, then e4, the knight is attacked. There really isn't a good square for the knight to move to. If, for example, knight b6, then e5 simply wins a piece. So in this position, d5 should be played by black, and after e5, g5. And now you can see that white is completely winning. So knight takes c4, simply loses after fg5. Bishop g4 is the way to try and complicate, but eventually black is just busted. So after the move d4, e takes d4 is the main line, and of course black has to be careful in it, but black should stand better if he knows everything. In the game though, ed4 wasn't played, e4 was played, which is also a theoretical move, but it's far less popular. And well, after e4, white is supposed to be better, and there is no way for black to equalize. Okay, it's almost certainly going to be a French defense structure in reverse, where white's c1 bishop is going to be locked down, because white will have to play the move e3. So it could get French-like in reverse, but if white is careful, he could try to avoid that. So here you could play knight g5, knight e5, or knight d2. I think knight e5 is best, even though you offer your pawn structure to be ruined, but you sort of don't block in your own pieces after something like bishop b4, e3, castles. This could be taken, of course, and eventually black would win a pawn, but at least white gets to develop now. Instead, knight g5 could be played, and after knight g5, bishop b4, I believe, is slightly better for black. Knight g5 should be an imprecise move because the knight is just stranded. So, for example, d5 chasing the knight away, bishop c3, bc3, knight a5, and this seems to be dropping. A blockade could be set up with d6, b6, bishop a6, and eventually you lose the c4 pawn. Eventually you have to move this knight again, so that's no good. In the game, knight d2 was played, which is acceptable. I still prefer knight e5. Now bishop b4, and Petrosian plays in a very principled way. He has weaknesses, he will induce them, and he's going to cause some havoc in the white position, and white is going to have to be defending. An interesting alternative, which I was looking at for a while, was, excuse me, I may sneeze, was to play the move e3, which is a common pattern to sort of ruin your opponent's pawn structure and to weaken some diagonals. Now, of course, you take it. If you don't take it, I take on f2. So after fe3, something like bishop b4, this would be interesting. White has a huge center, a weaker king, and a ruined pawn structure. And in fact, this has been played once. White won the game, and according to the engine, white should be slightly better. So seems interesting, but apparently it's bad. Instead of that, bishop b4. And the idea behind bishop b4 is I just want to take on c3, ruin your pawn structure, and then I should be better. Okay, e3 was played in the game. We are going to check. Okay, yeah, knight takes, of course. Knight takes e4 doesn't work because your other knight is pinned. At the end of the game, we are going to check everything with an engine. I forgot to mention that. Okay, finally e3. And now you could castle and allow queen c2 to defend the knight, but that would be a very engine-like way to play. I think what Petrosian did is very clean and very simple. Bishop c3, bc3. Now you have a target. Simple. Okay, black castles. White plays bishop e2, and now I think it was necessary to play d6 because d6 fixes these weak pawns, and after, for example, white castles, you play knight a5 and you just start putting pressure. The idea is, of course, putting pressure on c4, a move that cannot move forward easily. If c5 is played, then your pawn structure is ruined, and you have doubled pawns on c3 and c5, or after very thematic queen e7, then you even lose a pawn. So I think d6, knight a5, followed by b6, bishop a6 would be the best way to play. The problem with what Petrosian did in the game is he played queen e7, and now if you want, you can pause the video and find a great move for white. Find a way for white to solve all of his problems. Okay, of course, since d6 wasn't played, you play c5, and this seems very good for white. Now black will have to undermine this pawn structure and basically rid white of his weakness. You have to play d6 or b6. Once you play d6, I take it, and queen takes. And now this pawn structure is very good. This is now perfect for white. Not to mention c4, d5 that's coming, bishop b2. This seems just great. In fact, you could probably just start with c4 straight away. Let's say bishop to f5, let's say d5, knight e5, bishop b2. This seems very strong. This seems like a very strong position for white. Okay, so after queen e7, Petrosian could have been in trouble. Instead of that, his opponent didn't seize the moment to play c5, he castled, and now d6, and of course the same variation doesn't work because c5, dc5, dc5, queen c5 loses a pawn for white. White played a4, knight a5 played by Petrosian, and this is very Petrosian-like play. Fixing the weakness, trying to play very solid moves that simply create problems in the white position. Of course, c4 is the main issue now. Now here, white would probably have been best advised to play knight b3 to try and trade off the knight, and after knight b3, queen b3, of course there isn't as much pressure on c4, and you also make it very hard for the bishop to develop because b7 is weak. Also, c5 could have been played, which is very interesting in this position because of course the queen is on e7, and of course the bishop could come to a3 and try to win an exchange. So if you take, this shouldn't be winning for white, this winning of the exchange, because the position gets tricky after queen c3. But I think white should be much better. King f8, something like rook c1. Probably white isn't winning, I don't know. I would say that white is much better, close to winning, but I'm not sure if it's winning. But after knight a5, Mr. Bakhtadze didn't play knight b3 or c5. He played bishop a3 straight away, which is a weak move. It's a weak move because you didn't play c5. You're not threatening to win anything, and a very strong move can be played here. So positionally, find the way to fix white's weaknesses for the rest of the game. Find a great move for black. Okay, Petrosian played it, c5, and I'm not sure what the engine is going to say. I don't care what the engine is going to say. This seems to be a very strong move for humans because it just fixes all the weaknesses, makes the bishop bad, and also makes this bishop much worse. So with the knight on a5, you could play b6, bishop b7. This bishop has no scope, this bishop has no scope, the knight has no future because it's not getting to f3. So with the move c5, it seems that Petrosian just positionally and strategically won the game already. Again, we'll see what the engine says, but after c5, I think for strong players, if two strong players were playing, white would probably lose this position 8 out of 10 times. Okay, knight b3, trying to trade off the knight. Smart, your knight was stupid, so you trade it off. Knight b3, queen b3. Now you don't need to play moves like b6. You can focus on what's important, and that's trading off pieces, leaving white with the weaknesses on the board. Okay, so bishop g4, which I think strategically is very smart. You want to trade off pieces to highlight the weaknesses in the white position. Rook a2 played, defending the bishop. Rook a c8, which I don't really see as a move. I didn't really consider rook a c8. Of course, black would like the c-file to remain closed, because that would mean that the weaknesses are still here. But there could be issues on the c-file, because if you defend this pawn with b6, then a5 could come undermining your structure, and you have problems on the b-file. So I would prefer playing rook b8, and then, for example, rook to b1, b6, a5, I don't know, take, you play something like rook d8, and after this happens, I would prefer this position to having a rook on c8. I don't see a point to having a rook on c8. But rook a c8 defends the pawn without having to move b6, which of course is positionally safer because a5 isn't a threat. And on a5 you do nothing, on a6 you play b6 and you have a perfect position. But I still don't like the rook on c8. h3 played, now bishop takes e2, of course, rook takes e2, rook c7, which is a good move, laterally defending the 7th rank, and I guess the idea was just to secure everything, make sure you don't lose c5, and make sure you don't weaken yourself by moving the b pawn, which is very smart, and sort of shows just how strong positionally Petrosian was, and he didn't want to ruin his pawn structure, even if his rook was bad on c8 temporarily. And what strong players know is that you cannot move the pawns back, you can move your pieces again. So I still think the rook on c8 is bad, but positionally what he did was very instructive, and that's one of the, I think, most instructive points in the game. Here rook c7, rook d1 played, preparing to take and put pressure on the d file. Now one very important thing you have to note here is that as soon as this trade happens, if the rooks are doubled on the d-file, white will have the option of playing rook d5, giving up the exchange to get his other rook into play, and then the other rook on d5 cannot be dislodged. There will be no way for the rook to be dislodged. Petrosian plays queen e6, and I thought this was a weird move. But then I realized what he was trying to do. So white plays rook e2, which is normal. And now just remember this pattern. Takes, takes, and rook d5. Which of course can be taken, but then the other rook takes on d5, and white seizes control of the position. So that's always going to be interesting. Because then c5 will be attacked and a few tempi will be gained. So now Petrosian starts playing like Tal. White is threatening counterplay. Petrosian says, no, I'm going to kill you. And then he just goes crazy. Now, it's hard to find the normal move. You can play rook e8, you can play rook d8, you can play rook c8, rook b8. I don't see much point to knight d7, f5. You could play h6, even though that doesn't do anything. You could move the queen back. But he played g5. And makes a lot of sense. All of white's pieces are on the queen side, and in the center, nothing is defending the king. So why not? Okay, queen b5 played, which I don't understand, but okay. I think it's supposed to be putting pressure on the c5 point, but I think that's too slow. Queen f5 defends c5. And now this was interesting, and I think white could have sort of gotten control of the position with a very strong exchange sacrifice. I'm not sure what the engine is going to say, but DC and rook d5 seems crushing. So of course knight d5, rook d5. If, for example, queen g6, let's say queen g6, then you just snap this one off. You're threatening to take on a7. You're threatening. Whoa! There was something huge flying over me. Wait, whoa! Šta je ovo bilo? Aha, prošlo mi ovako.
Šta?
Oj.
Slišla?
It was a hornet. It's in the room. We have a hornet in the room. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Wait. Okay. So yeah, after this exchange sacrifice with dc5, rook d5, I think white would have been much better. Again, we'll see what the engine says, but in the final position after bishop c5, I don't know what black does. You don't have too much of an attack, because if you play, for example, g4, then I believe I could just take on f8, and if you take here, then I have rook g5. So you just lose. And after bishop c5, I don't know what else. I mean, if you play b6, then again, just take here. If you save your rook, I don't know, if you play rook e8, then I could probably just play bishop d6 and threaten to play rook g5, winning your queen. So this seems crushing. Instead, after queen f5, king h2 was played. And this is just too slow. And I think Petrosian's attack is now deadly. He plays g4, opening up lines. Rook h1 played, which, here's the problem with rook h1. After rook h1, you don't have dc5 again. And this trick doesn't work, because after rook d5, I just play knight d5. So again, after g4, I think dc5, rook d5 was interesting. Of course, knight d5, rook d5, let's say queen takes f2, and let's say rook g5 check, and I think white is good again. I don't see any problems. Let's say king h8, and now either bishop c5 or rook takes g5, and I think white is great. But after g4, white didn't seize the last opportunity to go for counterplay. And I was so upset that he didn't see this exchange sacrifice. It was really nice. Okay, he played rook h1, and now of course dc never works. King h8, preparing to play rook g8, very good. Hg. Now, of course, dc5 is now just a bad move. If you play rook d5, I just take it. hg4, queen takes g4, and now dc5 played here, which doesn't do anything. Perhaps white could have survived by just running away with his king, and let's say rook g8, let's say rook h2, and now I want my knight on g4, so something like queen f5, and I don't know what to do for white. Let's bring the queen back, and something like knight g4. Maybe this would have been okay. It seems like everything is defended. I'm not sure if white gets mated. We will check it with an engine. But definitely running away would have been better than d takes c5, which, I mean, black doesn't even have to respond to that. He played rook g8, of course, just threatening to mate on g2. g3 stopping mate. And now a beautiful move, queen f3. And queen f3, of course, threatens knight g4. It was about liberating squares for the rest of the pieces. And here white just lost it. He played cd6, and of course knight g4 check, king to g1. And now you pause the video, finds the crushing final blow. Okay, the move is of course knight takes e3. And if f takes e3, then it's a mate in 3. Rook takes, of course, king h2, rook h3 check, king g1, and rook takes h1 mate. And in the game after knight e3, queen e5 check was tried, but after f6, white just gave up. So let me show you why. For example, I don't know, queen b5, just mate, and if you take the knight, then excuse me. And if you take the knight, then I don't take your queen. Oh, I take your queen because I don't have rook g3. So, and the final sort of saving opportunity for white after queen f3, I tried to make king g1 work again, but I don't think it works. Just rook takes g3 and f takes g3. And this position is interesting. I couldn't make queen e3 work. Queen e3 seems to be a draw, but knight g4 seems to be winning because there will be no defense. So after knight g4, I'm now threatening queen e3, winning the rook. And let's say you try queen b2, defending. I play queen takes g3, you play king f1. If you play knight g2, I take on e3. You play king f1, I play knight e3 now, you play king e2, and now this is astonishing. So I spent probably an hour on this position because it seemed that black just wins, and I calculated until mate. With moving the pieces, it was too hard. So pause the video and try to analyze this position. Black wins by force, and try to calculate until mate. It's not forced. White has different defensive options, but just try to reach checkmate. And don't be ashamed to spend time. As I said, I spent an hour on this position. I'm not going to be showing you all the lines. I'll just show you one variation. So queen f3 first, winning the rook. King e1, okay, queen takes h1. That's all forced. King f2 or king e2 leads to the same queen f3 check. Okay, let's say king g1. Now we play queen f1 check, king h2. You play knight g4 check, king g3, and it's important to be driving this king around. And after queen f3, the king is forced to h4. So that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to force the king to the other side of the board. And now this is a nice move, which took me a million years to find, knight h6. And basically, mate is coming after knight f5 check. So for example, rook g2 or rook f2, knight f5 check, and now king g5 and h6, and that's going to be it. After king f6, wherever you move the knight, it's mate. And the king is covering g7, the rook is covering e7. These two are covered, these two are covered. And I think this is the final picture worth remembering. I think this is really nice. So, okay, coming back to this position. After king g1, which wasn't played, white just lost the game with cd6. And rook g3, f g3. Knight g4 was the winning attempt, and I showed you this one variation, which seemed winning. If after f g3, queen takes e3 is played, I just couldn't win. The rook f2 was the defense, and after knight g4, just queen b2. And remember that black gave up material already, so white has two rooks, and white is actually a rook head, and I just couldn't figure out what to do here. So I'm pretty sure I could go for a perpetual, or I could force you to defend somehow like this, and I was going to get my rook into play or continue with e3, but I just couldn't find a way to win. It seems that there is just too much material. I'm going to check with an engine. So I think this was a beautiful game, and let's return to this position. This is the critical point at which Petrosian started playing like Tal and played crazy. I'm going to add the engine now, and let's see what the engine thinks of g5. Okay, the engine doesn't see g5, which doesn't surprise me. So it says black is slightly better with rook e8, queen e7, or h6. And queen e7 doesn't really make much sense. The queen just came from there. h6 doesn't do anything. Rook e8 doesn't do much. So the engine doesn't know what to do, but thinks black is slightly better. And g5 says the position is equal, so it's not too bad. Queen b5 was the best tangent move. And now queen f5, and yeah, now it says white is close to winning, +1.5 after the exchange sacrifice. It was very strong, so takes, and rook d5. Yeah, the engine thinks this is just crushing. I mean, who cares about the exchange if you get that much activity, you win a couple of pawns, and of course g5 has weakened the position. Instead, king h2, and now g4 is correct. And again, the engine wants to play dc and rook d5, and again thinks white is slightly better. And after rook takes d5, queen f2. It says +1.5. I thought it was more than that. It's only +1 now. So apparently black is not lost, but white should be better. Now the engine takes on c5. This seems very strong for white. Yeah. Okay. Instead of that, rook h1, which just, yeah. Now there's no dc5 anymore. King h8, very strong main move. Hg4 played. The engine wants to take knight g4, but I understand queen g4 for rook g8. dc5 played now, yeah, it just loses. King g1, and as I said, I couldn't see a way to win. I played rook g8, and after king h2, queen f5 is correct, getting the knight into play. Whoa, queen a5, oh, queen f5, and let's not, what, okay, so the engine plays queen a5 and then says white resigns. I don't understand queen a5, it's just one move. So how does the engine win? Okay, let's say the rook moves. And now the queen goes back, okay. And now it does play knight g4. Okay, and how do you make progress? I just couldn't see how to break through here. Okay, defends the b pawn. Let's say a5. Yeah, the engine doesn't know how to win either. It just keeps shuffling pieces around. Now it takes on e3, okay. So now it saw something. So takes on e3, f takes e3. Aha, and queen f3. And I guess you defend. Okay, let's defend this way so that we don't. Okay. What happens on rook f1? Whoa, rook f1 is a mate in 5. Okay, that seems very strong. Yeah, because I have a rook g8. Okay, so the engine wins with the eventual queen takes e3. Okay, but king g1 definitely better than dc5, what was played in the game. Rook g8, g3, queen f3, yeah, it just seems crushing. And cd6 is game over after knight g4. So a crushing game. I mean, Petrosian played well positionally and strategically, got a better position. Then there was no way to improve his position, and he just played g5, g4. I was surprised, and I was happy to see that. Okay, so sorry for not mentioning, he was 15 at the time of this game. We are continuing the series next week with another game from the Georgian Championship. See you next week. Hope you liked the game, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.